I don't think I've ever felt this nostalgic because it's Laura Kuenssberg's final hours as BBC political editor. Yeah. Would you like to be reminded of your first few minutes in the job?
You might do that. What, you mean how young and fresh I used to look?
Yeah, we raided the Cine Film archive, and this is what we found.
Cafe News.
Let's talk to our political editor, Laura Kuenssberg. So, Laura, what's the significance of this change in wording then?
Well, Fiona, human nature, according to the Electoral Commission, makes us rather eager to please, more ready to say yes or no, whatever the question we are being asked. So today they've budged David Cameron into changing the question that will be put to us. So before the end of the next year, voters will be asked not to say yes or no to the EU, but whether they want to remain or to leave the European Union.
You're very tanned then. You've just been on a nice holiday or something.
Yeah, well, it was. I started in August. I started at the end of August 2015. So yeah, and it'd been a hot summer.
Can you remember that first moment? Because obviously you've been on the telly shed loads before that, but you're suddenly wearing this big title.
I do, because I remember actually specifically I started earlier. I suppose in a sign of things to come, I ended up starting earlier than I'd expected. Because actually there was people might remember there was a sort of immigration crisis in Europe that summer. All these pictures of people on the move. And then there was the terrible image of Ian Curdy, the little child who'd lost his life making a journey. And the BBC decided to make a special programme around the migration crisis. And I remember getting a phone call, I think from the boss at the time, saying, right, you're just going to have to start a few days early. We're doing a special. We need you in Down Street tomorrow night. I was like, actually, I think it might even have been that night. Right. So off I went. So I do absolutely remember, because I think I'd had a holiday and I'd been like, trepidatious, and I'd been at Newsnight and whatever. But I do remember. Really, really remember doing
I love that you started as you went on then. Do this now. Okay, fine.
Okay, yeah. I know you didn't think you were going to be working today, but actually you are. Oh, right. Should have known.
But because Laura is a super modest person, that's basically it now for going down memory lane. And on this episode of Newscast, we're going to be completely bang up to date with an amazing interview with the Chancellor.
Newscast from the BBC.
It's Laura in the studio, and it's the first time I've ever been allowed to go first.
And maybe last. It's Adam in the studio too.
That rare privilege granted after all these years of casting in various directions, podcast-wise.
Exactly, and unusually for this programme, we've been told we have to have laser-like focus. So
yes.
let's have laser-like focus.
And let's talk absolutely about what we'll do.
You haven't said hello.
Oh, did I not do that? No, maybe I didn't.
Anyway.
It's going so well.
It really is. So you've been sitting down, Laura, with Rishi Sunak, the Chancellor, after... Well, quite a week for him, really, after the spring statement and the reaction it provoked. And I guess him thinking, well, I better sit down and talk about it a bit more and make sure that people know that I get it as he would hope it's seen.
I think what happened last week, we talked about it on last week's programme, didn't we, that the Chancellor came up with his spring statement, and also if he's, people like him, they sweat over this stuff for months and months and weeks, and so it's a big deal. But it basically got quite a kicking, not just from, papers on the left, not just from think tanks or anything, but also from the conservative-leaning papers. It really was a difficult reception for the Treasury. So I think what Rishi Sunak's been trying to do is sort of explain himself, say, actually, this is what it was all about. So people will remember huge criticism for not doing enough to help people with the cost of living, which we all know is really getting tough for people out there. And secondly, for brandishing this promise of a tax cut and saying, hey, I'm a tax cutter, when actually we know that the tax burden's going up and up and up, and has done under this government. Maybe that's legitimate, maybe it's not, but he had a really, really tough political time.
And if you're watching or listening to this on Friday is the day when the energy price cap goes up. Yep. It finally happens after us talking about it for so long. And if you want to order a lateral flow test in England, they are no longer free. So the consequences of his decisions and the issues he's having to grapple with are playing out in real time right in front of us. And so that was the background to your interview. And you started off by saying to him, oh, what's it been like having this kind of week?
Yeah, someone said, Joe Root, Will Smith and me, not the best of weekends for any of us. But I think on reflection, both Will Smith and me having our wives attacked, but at least I didn't get up and slap anybody, which is good.
Did you feel like it?
Look, it's. I know what people are going through is tough, and that's tough. But in terms of me, and has it been a hard week? People being critical of the media, that doesn't make it tough for me, right? And I think like it was tough in my job, the first few months, the first few days, the first few weeks I had this job. That was really, really tough, trying to figure out what to do almost 2 years to the day, right? Today that we locked the country down. Those were probably the hardest weeks, trying to get that right. And I didn't get into this, because you want to be popular. So actually people being critical of you and that's not what makes the job hard. That's not why I got into it. So
that's interesting, because I know that, you put a lot of thought into what you do. I know that the Spring Statement was a really big day for the Treasury. It always is. Does it not get to you then that actually it came in for a lot of criticism? Because I know you put a huge amount into it, you put forward your ideas, and then actually you had, the Conservative papers, the left-wing papers, think tanks, a lot of people saying you'd got it wrong.
Yeah, and that's fine. That's how it should be, right? And we should debate these things, and we're there to be accountable for what we're doing. But I'm confident in what we've done, right? And I'm here talking to you. I did Treasury Select Committee earlier this week, and I'll keep explaining what we're doing and why we're doing it and why I think it's the right thing to do. And I know it's tough for people. We're facing a very difficult situation with the price of things going up, and I want to do what we can to ameliorate some of that. But I'm also honest with people that we can't ameliorate all of it, sadly. And I know that it's difficult for people to hear, and the toughest part of this job is not being able to do everything that people would like you to do, because we're already borrowing quite a large amount of money, and that and I don't think borrowing lots more would be sensible. Actually, it has the risk of making the problem worse when you've got inflation and interest rates going up. So those are the things I'm trying to balance. And within that, how best to get what types of help to what people. Those are the choices I made, and I feel confident in those.
It's interesting though, because you now say we'll do whatever you can. During the pandemic, you used to say I'll do whatever it takes. So can you just explain that shift in thinking? And I mean, do you worry, because the implication of that is, do you worry a bit that during the pandemic people got too used to government stepping in?
Yeah, someone said this, there's kind of, there's, pandemic Rishi and now there's post-pandemic Rishi. And I was kind of saying, well, no, it's the same Rishi, right? Doing the same things. I've got a set of principles and values, and I'm trying to make sure that we express those through the policies we do. And they're two very different situations. And, what was right for a pandemic when it was the government shutting down an entire economy is different now. And all parts of my job involve balancing risk. And if you think about what happened almost 2 years ago when we shut the country down, what was the biggest risk we faced and that I was worried about, as I was saying, was that we would have 10 million plus people who lost their jobs overnight, right? That was the single biggest thing that I was worried about. And so we did what we could do to try and protect as many of those as possible. But even then, I remember that was the first proper interview I did was with you on my birthday, and I think I said for the first time, sadly, I'm not going to be able to save everyone's job. And the biggest risk we face now is high inflation. And actually, the risk that becomes embedded and is something that we have to deal with for years and years is the thing I want to make sure doesn't happen. And that's why now the right thing to do is different to what it was then.
Let's just talk about some of the numbers, right? So the average dual fuel bill is going up by nearly £700 a year on Friday. Now, your offer is £150 off council tax. It's not an insignificant amount of money. And then £200 is a loan later in the year. But if you look at that increase in bills, nearly £700, what the government's offering people, £350 over time, part of that alone, what you're putting forward doesn't even touch the sides.
On your first point about, it's got worse since the autumn, it's precisely because we knew it was going to get tough, and I think I said that then, which is why we took action early to help on universal credit and deliver that policy as quickly as we could before Christmas. Now, ordinarily, policies like that take months and they would have come in about now, but I went out of my way to figure out how we could bring it in slightly sooner to start getting help to people sooner.
That was
so
but
I guess we did that.
Whacked.
We did that in advance of this happening, right? So I think it's one thing is say if you do it too late, and people will say, oh, you waited too late, and now if you do it early, people are like, oh, you haven't got anything new to offer, so you kind of can't win either way. But on the energy bills, look, absolutely right. And when we knew about what was happening with the energy price cap in February, that's when it was announced, and on the same day, I stood up and made a statement in Parliament and explained what we would do to help people. And I was clear then, and actually I think it was broadly well received, that it was clear that the government can't make all of that go away, right? And I was clear then, like, we are adjusting, all of us, having to adjust to higher energy prices.
But there are other political choices that you could have made that might not have required tens and tens of billions. There were even some people in your party who would have liked you to have made other decisions. You know, inflation is running at double the amounts that benefits and the state pension are going to go up by about 3%. You didn't do anything about that in your spring statement. You didn't scrap the national insurance rise. I know you made some tweaks to the numbers of people who'd be paying it, but lots of people in your own party thought it was crazy to be putting a tax up now.
I think you started by saying there are things you could do that wouldn't cost a fortune, and that would cost, over the period that all these numbers look at, the forecast period, doing that to welfare would cost about £25 billion. It would be another £25 billion, round numbers, to do the same on pensions, right? So that's £50 billion already, you know, and then you can add more to start compensating government departments for inflation and pay. That's another tens of billions of pounds. So actually, what the thing that you are suggesting, or someone else might be suggesting, would mean a significant increase in borrowing. Significant increase. It's not a small decision. It is a tens and tens of billions of pounds decision to do that. And for the reasons that we've just been over, you know, we're making judgments about what's appropriate and not. And I'm confident that we are helping those on the lowest incomes. The vast majority of them either are in or can work, and we are spending a fortune to give them the skills and the support they need to find new jobs, find better jobs, find their first jobs. So that, combined with the changes we've made to universal credit, give me the confidence that we are helping them, and we've created a new discretionary support fund worth £500 million going to local councils to help those most vulnerable families who need a bit of extra help. So that's the first one. So that thing is, as I said, it's not a small thing. It's literally tens and tens of billions of pounds.
But some people thought that actually, whether or not the NHS levy in principle is a good thing, actually increasing people's taxes right now is a crackers thing to do. And lots of people in your own party were pushing very hard for you to suspend that tax rise altogether.
Yeah. So what we did by raising the national insurance thresholds by the considerable amount that we did, which means that nobody will pay a penny of income tax or now national insurance on the first £12,500 that they earn. It's a very significant tax cut for 30 million people.
Well, it's a cut of something that you were going to do. I mean, Labour said it was the hokey-cokey, because a few months ago you said, I'm going to put it up, and now you said, oh, well, I'm only going to put it up for some of those people. I mean, it's a bit,
No, hang on. No, so the levy is the levy.
Gives with one hand and then
well,
takes away with
they're
the
two
other.
very different things. I think it's absolutely right that we have a dedicated source of funding for the country's number one priority, and that's a new thing for this country. Like, we all know how important the NHS and social care is, but because of the tax cut we announced last week, 70% of taxpayers, 70% of NICS payers are going to pay less tax even after accounting for the new levy. That's how generous what we did last week is.
But you did promise an income tax in 2 years' time, when by your own admission, lots of people are going to have a really hard time making ends meet now in the coming months. Do you worry you misjudged the mood?
No, because they're two different things. We have also delivered a very generous tax cut immediately. It's coming in July, the raising of the national insurance thresholds. That's worth £6 billion of tax cuts for 30 million people. It's the biggest personal tax cut in a decade. It's hugely significant. And we also cut fuel duty for the first time in a decade, and by more than it's been cut pretty much in its history, as far as we can broadly tell. And that, again, is another multi-billion pound tax cut that will make a big difference to people. So it's not like that we're not taking action now. We're taking significant action now. Now, the point about the income tax cut is because, rightly, since the autumn, people have been focused on taxation for the first time in a while, which is a good thing, right? I'm glad that we're having that conversation. And the general thing that people should have in mind is government needs to pay for the things it's spending on. We're spending rather a lot on plenty of good things, more police officers, more nurses, levelling up, etc., right? But we need to pay for those things in the face of having suffered a very significant economic shock because of coronavirus. That's why the tax burden has had to creep up, to make sure that we continue paying for those things. But I wanted to make it clear, as I said in the autumn, that the direction of travel from this point forward is for people's taxes to go down, right? I can't pretend away the fact that we've had a crisis and we need to deal with that. But from this point forward, I wanted people to have confidence that we will continue to cut their taxes, not just today, but tomorrow as well. And by doing that, it gives people a sense of direction. And I think it creates a discipline around government that our collective priority, and again, we can have this conversation as a country, is our collective priority is to be reducing the tax burden and not continuing to increase public spending even more than we are.
In terms of it's interesting talking to you this afternoon, you've really clearly and really passionately actually made your case, which is, look, we've got to get off borrowing so much. We have to wean ourselves off this. And if anyone wants to come and fight me on that territory, great, I'll square up to them. Do you wish or feel that you could have explained that a bit better last week?
Well, look, you're the comms expert, so I mean, if that it wasn't apparent, then clearly, well, that's why I'm here talking to you today, and why I will keep talking to people. And I made that case at the Treasury Select Committee in Parliament. And I know
you, Rishi Sunak, willing actually in the next couple of years to be quite unpopular.
Yeah, I didn't get into. I don't do this job and put the hours in and everything else that it entails, to win some popularity contest. I'm doing what I believe every day when I come into the office, trying to do the right thing for the country. And it's clearly, like, I could have stood up last week and made lots of other decisions that would have made people very happy for 24 hours and would have been popular. This windfall tax is a good example of that, right? But I'm trying to do what I believe is right for the country in the long term.
You see, some of your cabinet colleagues do think you're quite interested in being popular too. I mean, one of them said to me things would be fine for Rishi Sunak as long as he's standing on the street corner giving out free fivers. But when that runs out, things might get a bit tricky. Are things getting a bit tricky?
But again, it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning. And if I wanted to just be popular, then I'm sure there are lots of different choices I could have made, right? But I don't believe they're the right ones. And I'm going to explain best I can to the country why what I'm doing I believe is right for the country, why ultimately some of these things are difficult, they're certainly unpopular, but they're responsible and will help us in the long term. And I'm not going to deviate from that just for some short-term popularity gain. And that's why I'm happy to keep making the case for what I believe and why I think it's right.
What happened with you filling up someone's car? What was that all about?
Well, I feel I've obviously done a great favour for the head of marketing at Kia this week, if nothing else, this past week. No, look, after all of these events, you've covered this for years, right? Like the Chancellor would typically go and do a visit somewhere, to kind of highlight a policy that we've put in place. Obviously, one of the things that people are focused on is the price of fuel at the moment. We obviously have cut fuel duty for the first time in a decade by the most that it's ever been cut. And I went to try and showcase that policy, and as part of a visit, and it was one of the employees at the place, and I was filling up his car, and that was what that was about. And it was nothing more, nothing less. And if people can have a laugh, that's fine. But ultimately, it's a way for people to realise, okay, fine, they're doing something on fuel duty, and is it going to solve?
So actually, if there's a fuss about it, you end up getting more coverage for what you were doing.
If people have taken away from all of that we have actually cut fuel duty by 5p for the first time in a decade and the biggest amount ever, that's a good thing. And look, that's not going to solve all the problem with petrol prices, but it shows that we are where we can make a difference and try to make some difference within the bounds of what's possible that helps a lot of people than we are.
You have had a bit of a ripping though in the sort of environment, in the aftermath of it. And one of the things that did happen is people started asking questions about, your family and about your wife. What was that like? I mean, she got dragged into it over her family's business interests. What did that make you feel?
I think it's totally fine for people to take shots at me. It's fair game. I'm the one sitting here, and that's what I signed up for. It's actually it's very upsetting, and I think wrong for people to try and come at my wife. And beyond that, actually, with regard to my father-in-law, for whom I have nothing but enormous pride and admiration for everything that he's achieved, and no amount of attempted smearing is going to make me change that, because he's wonderful and has achieved a huge amount, as I said, and I'm enormously proud of it.
But on Brexit, you said something interesting the other day. You came close to admitting that Brexit was having a negative impact on trade. Now, if people missed it, you said it was always inevitable there would be change in our trade intensity with Europe as a result of the changing relationship. Well, look, trade intensity going down, that means people are making less money, right? Doesn't it?
Yeah, the point I was making, I think I've said it before, and lots of other people have said it before. The Prime Minister said it before. I think there was always going to be a change in the nature of our trade with Europe once we left a customs union, right? A customs union is a very particular form of how you trade with countries around you, and even though we have, I think, an exceptionally deep, comprehensive free trade agreement that there isn't really any replica for anywhere around the world for how good it is as a free trade agreement. It's not the same as being part of a single market and a customs union.
Yeah, but the numbers show very clearly that trade with Europe has gone down. That means people are making less money. When do you hope to be able to prove to people that your belief was that it was the right thing to do? When do you think you'll be able to prove that?
So, look, on trade, as I said then, I do believe, honestly, it will take a little bit of time because there's so many different things going on as supply chains are adjusting, both to the new trading relationship with the EU, but also coronavirus, right? So it will take a little bit of time to settle down. But look, it's, I said, inevitable that there will be some change. Brexit, I always thought was not an event in one sense. We should think about it as a process, the benefits of which will accrue over time. And
say a process on the side of a bus. It said 350 million quid a week.
And well, there are many benefits of Brexit, right? And many of which we have realised very quickly. For example, a change in a migration system, right? And we can do those things that we can do very quickly. I announced last week. In the spring statement, because we're no longer subject to the EU rules, we were able to be more generous in how we VAT energy-saving materials like heat pumps and solar panels, right? And look, again, all of these things cumulatively add up. Free ports is another example of a policy that we've put in place. Again, we're able to go further than we would be able to under the EU. Trading relationships with other countries, which will take time. That again, the benefits of those don't accrue overnight. They accrue over years as countries and companies adjust to the fact that there's a new set of opportunities for them. But I do believe over time, and then every time we can do something different regulatory-wise, that's supportive of innovation, for example, whether it's in life sciences or technology, that will then lead to perhaps a company getting started that does a new product that creates jobs. All these things.
So many unknowns.
Yeah, there's lots of things over time that I all think will accumulate to it being positive for the country. Some of which we've already seen the benefits of, migration, and others which you'll see over time.
Well, one of the other huge events, it's been such a crazy time since you've been in the job, of course, is what's gone on over the Partygate saga. It's come to be known. Now, the last time we talked, you said you didn't know what had gone on in Downing Street. In terms of clarity and transparency, if you get a fine, we know that you got a questionnaire, but if you get a lockdown fine, will you make that public?
Yes.
You will. If Boris Johnson gets a fine, can he stay on as Prime Minister or should he resign?
No, well, he's already been asked this. I think he was asked it literally an hour ago or 2 hours ago.
Yeah, so I'm asking you.
It's not for me to answer on his behalf. And I think what the Prime Minister said, which is...
What's your view? You're probably the second most senior person in the government. Can a lawmaker be a lawbreaker? Is that okay?
I think it would be wrong for me to say anything more than what the Prime Minister has said, Laura. And he said, look, we don't know the answer to these questions today, right? So they're questions for when the inquiry has concluded. It's right that it concludes, and the Prime Minister has been very clear that he will address it at that time. And look, it's tough for me to add anything more to what he said. He's answered your direct question.
Yeah. Do you think that the government how would you sort of describe the state of the government? I suppose there's just been so many event after event after event. If you go back to 2019 and that election, this mighty majority, and then Corona, the pandemic, Partygate, that saga of what happened during lockdown, and now war in Ukraine. I suppose, you are one of the most senior politicians in the country. You see what's happening behind closed doors. How would you sort of, I suppose, describe the state of the government? Your heads must just all spin sometimes, sure.
Yeah. Well, I think we're lucky we've got a team of really hard-working people who actually, I think, are probably really more energised now because coronavirus, it kind of meant that we couldn't get on and do all the things that we were wanting to do. We've got these amazing cabinet ministers itching to get on and do things in their areas, reform things, make progress, and we just couldn't do any of that because of coronavirus. And we are getting on and doing all of that now. And I think people will start to see all the benefits of that. And our job over the next couple of years is to deliver these things. We've made lots of announcements. We've got lots of plans. We're going to get on and now deliver all these things that we've said we're going to do and have funded with these very generous amounts of spending that we've already talked about. And so actually, I think there's an enormous energy. It's like the opposite of people who think, oh, gosh, you've got 2 years in, everyone's a bit tired. It's literally the opposite of that. Everyone is kind of feeling now free to actually, we can get on, coronavirus is behind us, let's get on and do these things.
And just lastly, what about you as Chancellor? Gordon Brown, who was Chancellor for such a long time, is often quoted as, he had this joke he always used to tell us to business audiences. He used to say there are two kinds of Chancellor. there are those who fail.
And those, yes, who get out just in time.
Which one are you going to be?
I have used that. I've used his joke at other
use it as
occasions.
well?
Yeah.
So what's your punchline then?
Well, that's always in the hands of the Prime Minister, isn't it? So it's at his pleasure. So so I can't really add much more to that. But look, you're right. It's been a busy couple of years, right? It's been a busy couple of years. I've had to deal with a lot. Everyone's had to deal with a lot, and we'll just go. We'll keep going, right? We'll keep going. We'll get through it. My general view is if we've got through the last couple of years, we can get through anything as a country, and that's what I'm amazed actually and humbled every time I'm out on one of these visits, whether it's filling up people's cars or otherwise. And so I feel confident. Challenging months ahead though we have, we will get through it.
And your purchase at the garage was £30 and 1 pence of petrol. Was it a Coke and a Yorkie? Or...
No, Twix. I'm a Twix person. I know that was very irritating. I normally try and solve it to the to the round thing, but yes, it went over by a penny. And yes, Twix and a Coke are my sugar of choice for these kinds of things.
Chancellor, watching the pennies to the last. Rishi Sunak, thank you so much for joining us on Newscast.
Thank you for having me.
I must admit, it is quite tempting at the petrol pump for no good reason, particularly if you're paying with a card and so you're not having to ferret out the exact amount of notes or whatever, to get it exact.
You set yourself a little target.
Yeah. I don't know, because if you're filling it up and it hits that bit where it says it's basically full and you think, oh yeah, but it's such and 72p. Oh, I reckon I can get it up to, double O.
Now you say that, I do that as well. I'm like, let's go for £10 or £20 or whatever. Although now it's like, let's go for 90 quid filling up a tank of diesel.
One day I'll be grown up enough to have a car. But also, isn't it interesting? I mean, and already that interview's making loads of headlines kind of around the world because he waded right into the Will Smith, Chris Rock, Jada Pinkett Smith thing, which is unusual. Which is unusual because politicians want to avoid things like that most of the time, and he just dived straight in.
But it's tempting to sound of the now, which I guess is probably what he was trying to do.
Well, I think he was trying to find a way of kind of saying, yeah, I've had a tough time, but actually, now let me explain all the things that are really important. And I think he did as well. It was interesting that what he said very clearly and very plainly, actually sitting in that seat, Chris, was, we've just got to stop borrowing as much as a country. He just said it really plainly, really clearly, in the way that George Osborne used to say. I think some people in his own party would think, God, if you'd said that more obviously last week, you might not have had this kind of howl round.
Because that's kind of at the core of his beliefs, isn't it? He talks about that all the time in various speeches.
Yeah, he believes it.
Thanks for that brilliant interview, and thanks for everything as well. And that's it for this episode of Newscast. We'll be off for the holidays for Easter for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be back on your TV screens, and the podcast will carry on BBC Sounds as normal. And if you're looking for some excellent on-demand content, I can recommend a little mini documentary called Everything Has Changed, which is looking back at the last 6 or 7 years in British politics and how bizarre it's been and dramatic through the eyes of Laura Kuenssberg.
And lots of other people, Nigel Farage and Nicola Sturgeon and all sorts of other people.
And it's on BBC Sounds, and hilariously on iPlayer, the way that it's phrased, it says, everything has changed with Laura Kuenssberg. Which actually is kind of true as well. Laura, thank you for everything. I've absolutely loved sitting here with you. And I think all I want to say to you is that the best feeling in the world is making you laugh. Because you work so hard, and it's really, I can see it's sometimes quite stressful. But so you coming in here and me being able to crack a joke and you laughing is absolutely amazing. And the memories of this room and these headphones are just amazing.
Oh, okay, we're not allowed to say anything else nice, or else I should be visibly moved.
Yeah.
Thank you both so much. And thank you to all our amazing newscasters.
From all of us, thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Newscast from the BBC.